sharing our stories connects us. Listen and be connected. Join us for the conversation meeting weekly at the intersection of community and culture. Hosted by Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter. Welcome back, everybody, to this your Wednesday edition of The Conversation. You know, if it's Wednesday and it's noon, it's The Conversation on WMNF 88.5 right here in Tampa. I'm one of your two hosts, Mario Nunez, and as always, I'm seated next to my ably... how are we going to refer to you today, Joe? Because I change it up every week. My Natalie attired... because you can't see him, and he's really not. My Natalie attired co-host,
Joe King Carter, always your obedient servant.
Thank you, sir. Let's ring a bell for obedience and servitude. Thank you, Joe, for being here as always, brother. I wouldn't want to do this show without you. Hey, how was your week, man? We're on the backside of this week. Last week at this time, we were discussing your woes because you had no electricity at your house, and you had no electricity for about 13 days.
No, 15 days.
15 days, and it must have been a harrowing 15 days.
Well, you know, it's a first, as I said, it's a first world inconvenience. You know, so many suffered so horribly that I never felt like I had the right to really say a lot about it. I just kept pushing and pushing to make it happen. I will tell you an interesting little side story, though, out of last week is that someone listening to this show, someone who is an avid fan, came to my rescue because they heard me on the show, who I'm not going to plug a business. We're not allowed to do that here. But I'll just say, as a listener, his name is Jim McCluskey. And he came to my house to help me with my problems. And in the conversation, I realized that he knew every detail and every programmer and every show on WMNF. And he said, I listen to you every week. And I was just I was amazed. I was elated that knowing those kinds of people are out there.
And let's ring a bell for Jim McCluskey. And apparently Jim has some insight as to what he might have been able to do for you vis-a-vis your electrical needs.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jim, for listening.
Helped me a great deal.
First and foremost, and secondarily for helping my good buddy Joe get it back together, because he was becoming irascible and incorrigible, more so than usual, and it was very, very difficult to deal with him at times.
Hey, have you ever shaved with a flashlight? It's not easy.
I wouldn't want to. So, so let's also kind of shift gears real quick and talk about something that's very prescient and in front of us within 5 days now.
Yes.
A national election that is way too close for anybody's comfort, and is causing a lot of us agita and gas and things of that ilk. And you know, most recently, I wonder sometimes what the other side is thinking, because you know the GOP, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Eventually, maybe they'll shoot that foot off. We can only hope. But, you know, they made some comments.
Don't hold back.
At Madison, no, why should I? Madison Square Garden on Sunday that affected me profoundly as a Latino male. My mother was born in Ponce, in Puerto Rico. My grandparents were born in Yabucoa and Juana Diaz. I've got family all over the island. And if anybody's ever been to Puerto Rico, and our guest today, Mike Norton, who you'll meet in just a moment, lived there for a time. It is a magnificent island. It's a gem of the Caribbean. And of course, we don't need to give you a history lesson. Since 1917, those residents have all been United States citizens. They cannot vote for senatorial representatives or presidential elections as residents of the island. But the minute they step foot on the mainland, they become full-fledged members of our society as citizens of the United States, which gives them the right to vote. So, you know, when you go to saying disparaging remarks and disgusting and disparaging remarks like were uttered at Madison Square Garden, which I won't even repeat. You can look them up if you haven't heard them already. That's very damaging. It's wounding to a whole segment of our population. And needless to say, these people have worn the uniform of the United States Armed Forces. They have bled and died for this country. And I think disproportionately, they also have been awarded the Medal of Honor for their service, because that's the kind of people that the Puerto Ricans are. So let's think twice. Maybe 3 times before you pull that lever when you go into the booth, if you haven't voted already, because voting has started now. It's been going on for a week and a half. And why in the world, Joe, would you wait until election day to go vote unless you're some kind of manic traditionalist because you can vote early.
Yes.
And it takes all the stress out of it.
I did so yesterday.
Your mail-in ballots, it comes to your home. You
Yes.
fill it out with your favorite beverage. You take your time. You're thoughtful with the way you fill out your ballot. And then you go drop it off at your polling place. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to vote early if you can. I think it helps the entire system.
And as we say each and every week here in the last few weeks, especially as we wind this political season, this election season down, democracy, as it were, is a full-on participatory sport. It only works. And, the more we get closer to this particular election, we realize this thing, yes, it can fall apart. If we don't buy into the system, if we don't believe in the rule of law, and if we don't believe that votes matter, votes count, democracy dies. And we've never experienced that here in this country. We got to go back to, Europe and World War II. We've got to talk to some countries now. Cuba comes to mind, where they don't have any rights. People don't have any rights. And we take ours for granted, I think. And these immigrants that are being disparaged, they don't, because they come here by choice.
Yes.
Okay. We should tack away from that because the show was not dedicated to political talk today, but I just felt it incumbent upon me. And Joe, thank you for indulging me because the election is next Tuesday. And by the time we come back and sit here with you next week, we'll be on the other side of all of that.
Well, I'm sure that there are many people out there in our listening audience who are glad you said these things because they're probably in agreement with you.
Thank you, sir. So today's guest is a gentleman that I had the pleasure of meeting 2 years ago when I first took in Erie Nights at the Henry B. Plant Museum. They put on a wonderful production every year at Halloween for 2 weekends, 6 nights. And it's a bit of a scavenger hunt. They dress out the museum in period time. It coincides with everything that's All Hallows Eve. And they actually have Edgar Allan Poe walking the halls to kind of guide you through. And twice during the time that you're there, he does a performance. When I met him, I was totally awestruck because if anybody's ever read The Raven, you know that is an incredible piece of literature, and then to memorize it and perform it is even more difficult. So a year went by. This year I had the occasion to reconnect with the actor again, only better than that, invited him to sit with me on the Tampa Native Show, which I host as well. Many of you know that. And I got to know Mike Norton. And Mike is our guest today. Mike, thank you so much, brother, for coming in.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And no stranger to WMNF. He knows the hallways here. He's been here before.
Good.
And Mike has been not only a practicing thespian, I'll say that again, a practicing thespian since his earliest years.
Card carrying.
Went to the University of South Florida to study theater. Madison Junior High School, Robinson High School, go Knights.
Go Knights.
So he's from Tampa. He can talk to you about Buffalo Avenue and the High Life Fronton when it was all there. Mike, I'm going to introduce Joe into the conversation because he usually takes us through this part of it. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Michael. Of
Pleasure,
course. So, let's begin with the beginning. Let's go back to your family, where you were born, and how that all sort of evolved early in your life.
I'm a military brat. My dad was in the Navy. He was a lifer. He was an officer. When I was born, he was still flying jet aircraft. He'd flown them off the Forrestal. I started in something called a Starfighter, which is like a Korean War era almost. And then by the end, he was flying F-4s. We lived a lot of places, but I was born in Pensacola, so I'm a native Floridian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep. I think they refer to us as crackers sometimes.
Yes, crackers.
Right.
Affectionately.
One of our landmark historic districts.
Absolutely.
Pensacola Air Base. So
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
Navy base.
I think cracker, boy, that term's been around since Shakespeare at least. It usually refers to people who are not wealthy, but are hardworking and industrious. In Florida, at one point, almost everyone was. This was the wild frontier of America, long past any other place on the eastern seaboard, that's for sure, and even some of the places out west. As we like to say, air conditioning, it made Florida great.
That's right. That's right. And thank you for saying that because, by the way, I come from Georgia crackers, and I grew up as a Florida cracker. And cracker is a word that unfortunately has become, in some circles, derogatory because it's been misunderstood.
Yes.
A pejorative for sure.
Yes. Well, you know, something wealthy people would say about those who are not wealthy. So yeah, it was a little pejorative indeed.
So you end up though in Tampa for a length of time.
In '73, I was between 12 and 13. My family moved here. We came down by train from Washington D.C.
Wow.
So this is before they'd opened the big train station up again. So that beautiful big building was empty, and next to it there was a tiny trailer, and that was my introduction to Tampa.
Oh wow.
Yep.
So Union Station was not at all operational at the
they
time.
didn't open that thing up again, I think, until '98. So yeah, it was just this giant, beautiful, empty, scary-looking building. And then we took a cab down the Bay Shore and went into MacDill Air Force Base, and that's what started my life here in Tampa.
Wow. Okay.
What did you think about the Bay Shore when you saw it for the first time? Pretty impressive.
Yes, visually, but they were right in the middle of a red tide. And oh yeah,
Stinky.
so Tampa had an odor. It's just like we come out, it's like, oh man, what is that smell?
Pretty offensive. Pretty
But
offensive.
Ooh to Tampa, right?
Yeah,
Ooh to
yeah.
Tampa. So, do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have five. Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm the middlest of the middle
The
children.
middle kid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which explains probably
Two,
why
and
I
then
became
you, and
an
then
actor.
two more.
Yeah. So I've got older brother, older sister, youngest brother.
Wow,
Oh, cool.
Interesting. So, the five of you and your parents are now in Tampa, and what happens next?
I go to Madison Junior High, which at that time was still maroon and white. But in the next year I was there, they painted it banana yellow. There's some theory that the maroon and white was too depressing for the students. There wasn't any theater at Madison, but there was when I got to Robinson High School. And I think that's when the theater bug really hit me. Our drama teacher, Jennifer Albritton, although her name was Buttles at the time, she loved theater, and she was able to really install that into the students. And so I got that acting bug pretty hard at that point and never really let me go.
And it is a bug, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And how did that express itself in you? Tell me a little bit about how you felt when you were doing your first stage, when you were first getting involved.
I played Thorn Oakenshield in The Hobbit. So I was Prince of the Dwarves.
With the big hairy feet?
With a big hairy beard. So they latexed up this beard on me. It had to be almost as long as I was. And at the time, I had grown about 4 hairs on my upper lip and was inordinately proud of it. And so they said, we're going to have to shave that. I was like, no. Well, the latex is like, no, I don't care. And when they took the latex beard off, the hairs went with it. Oh, yeah. But despite that, I had such a great time. Also got involved in speech and debate at that time, the National Forensic League. And at the end of that year, I got a letter jacket for speech and drama.
Of course you would.
Yeah.
Of course you would. Did you get a chance to perform on High Q or one of the high school shows during your high school years? Remember that was very popular.
Oh, very popular. No, we would do, it was like intramural, and then we would go and perform it and debate at other high schools. We never actually got on television at that time. I did get to go on Dr. Paul Bearer, though. A couple years later, we did Arsenic and Old Lace as our summer play. And, I don't know if your guests can see this, but this is my deathly certificate for being on Dr. Paul Bearer in 1976.
Here, let's
beautiful.
get that into the camera.
Yeah, we'll get it into the
It
camera.
was Halloween. I thought maybe it would tie in.
For those watching us on Facebook Live, you can see it. It says Deathly Certificate. This is to certify that Mike Norton has been presented this certificate for appearing on Creature Feature, awarded by none other than Dr. Paul Bearer, July 17, 1976, your sophomore year, the end of your sophomore year.
Yep.
I had just graduated myself, and it's signed by, of course, Dr. Paul Bearer. And I imagine he was lurking for you at the time.
Oh, it was amazing. And I had what I liked about Dr. Paul Bearer, first because I love monster movies, was that when we'd been up in Washington, D.C., there had been a Saturday afternoon horror show host named Sir Graves Ghastly. So when I moved to Tampa and they had their own horror show host, Paul Bearer, it was just like, oh, this town's going to be okay.
Yeah, I'm home.
This town's going to be all right.
Absolutely. That's the golden age of creature features in America through the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
And just before that, we had the campy Shock Armstrong, All-American Teenage Ghoul. For those of us that are old enough to remember that, and the sad tragedy about Shock Armstrong is, of course, all of the videotape that was used to tape his programming was taped over because the tape was expensive back then and they had to repurpose it.
Yes.
So we don't really we have audio tape and we have still photographs, but we don't have any of the imagery except what's stuck in most of our our memories. And
Shock was still around, but at that point they no longer had an actor. They just had his head.
Correct.
And they would swing it out as Channel 13, I think.
I remember spin around on a turntable.
On a turntable.
We did have on Saturday afternoons. We had Terminus Theater, which was always showing the black and white features, from the '60s, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, so forth and so on. And that was also pretty scary.
Yes.
Terminus Theater and The Outer Limits.
Hammer films from England, things like that.
Were you attracted to, I don't want to say the macabre, but were you attracted to the eerie and the spooky early on?
Oh, yeah. All the time. I had those Scholastic Book Club books, the Monster Joke Book.
Yes.
Yeah, and that sort of thing. And posters of Frankenstein, the classic Universal Frankenstein.
100%.
Oh, yeah, all that.
We have some things in common, Michael.
I'm guessing, Mike, that you might have spent a Saturday afternoon or two at Chan's hobby shop, maybe getting your monster models and building them as well.
The Aurora ones? You bet.
Yes.
You bet.
Yeah, I had some too.
And that's back when you had to be careful with the model. Model glue had to be used in ventilated areas.
Well, we weren't sniffing glue yet, but we almost were.
But if you weren't
maybe
careful.
by accident.
Exactly.
So if you had lived in a different era later, you might have been a real goth kid.
I became a goth adult. So I guess that classifies.
It carried over.
Yeah.
It carried over.
So the back in the 90s, I'd be at the castle. My wife and I, we'd be at the castle 3-4 nights a week.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. It was a great time. Cynthia
Devotees.
was the manager then. Yeah. One of the channels came in and did a news thing on it back in the day. And so I was interviewed, but they didn't use my tape. There was a stunning goth girl that got most of the time. Hard to believe an attractive woman would get more airtime than me, but these things happen.
I think that the goth scene here in Tampa, which was profound, because really it had deep roots, deep tentacles. It reached far and wide, so much so that I think there was a Saturday Night Live feature with Chris Kattan. I remember distinctly. That was a public access show.
Molly Shannon, it was all about being goth kids.
And they alluded to Tampa at some point in there. And I think Tampa was the inspiration for that. A lot of the actors, I won't say a lot, but several of the actors have come through the Tampa area at one point. Jim Brewer,
and some of their writers too. Yeah.
Some of the writers as well.
Yeah,
so there's
absolutely.
a deep connect. Did you ever... Well, I mean, we're jumping the shark a little bit here, going to back and forth, but bear with us, people. We're all over the place. Did you ever want to kind of be a member of that cast? Did you ever aspire to be on
sketch comedy? Yes,
Isn't
definitely.
Isn't that the best?
I had a comedy act for a long time. I worked with another guy. We were Wise Guys Comedy. There was two of us, character. And then when I came back from California, I was a single act. So that's when I started Norton Interactive Comedy and doing characters and shows for themed events. But for years and years, any venue that would pay.
Yeah.
Because after all, an actor's only worth his salt if that check clears, or if they'll give you that cash before you go out the back door.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Let me remind everybody that this is an interactive show. That's the second time we've mentioned the word interactive here in the last 2 seconds. And if you'd like to join the conversation, call us at 813-239-9663 if you've got a question for Mike or for myself. Or Big Joe, because he's right next to me here. You can also send us a text at 813-433-0885. Emails welcomed, dj@wmnf.org.
And we'll take calls about Halloween. And because it's tomorrow.
It's thematic today. Today we're talking spooky, eerie things. But yes, if you want to share a story of your trick-or-treating here in Tampa when you were a kid, we'd love to welcome those stories as well.
And I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only human who loved Halloween, really, to be honest, much more than Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is... for the creative mind, it's just a wonderful, rich context of things
It
happening.
should have been more than just one night. You know, you should have been able to reprise your character.
That's right.
Or have a change of wardrobe. You know what I mean? Tonight I'm Frankenstein, tomorrow Dracula.
So to that end, so I did a little acting in college and things. And I bring that up just to say I'm always curious, because I've had a number of good friends over the years who are professional actors. That bug thing. Let's go back a little bit to that before we get too far. Where in there, because I can tell you that performing is fun and interesting and creative and all that stuff, but there are people that do it and have some fun with it and move on. Lots of people probably, like myself. And then there are people that, man, it's just there. They got to have it.
Yeah, no, it's their profession.
How did that,
in Mike's case?
Kind of when and how did that happen with you, other than what you've already described?
Applause when you get up there, and it's that immediate gratification when the
Yeah.
audience applauses, when the audience laughs, when you can take a room full of people and just by what you said and how you said it, you can create in them emotions.
Yes.
Safe emotions. I mean, that's the joy of theater, of course, is that people can experience joy, sorrow, fear, and it's all safe. And at the end of the day, there's no commitment to it. They can walk away from it. But
Typically
the
at
fact
the
that
end
you
of the-
can bring people to that and then get applauded and then eventually get paid. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like champagne for breakfast.
Yeah, there you go.
It's typically at the end of the performance that you were saying, alluding to safe space. There's the bow.
Yes.
There's the curtsy. So that lets everybody know that the performance is now over. It's safe to
You
go
break
home.
that fourth wall.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And I think applause tend to make actors, laughs tend to make comedians, and then there are comedic actors. So, I mean, it's all mixed there together.
That's where I think I fall into mainly comedic, but I do, well, any part, any character, pretty much if it's a European male, I'm willing to give it a shot.
Okay. So now let's get back into the bio. Now you're committed to being an actor. Now you're college age. What happens next?
Went to USF. My degree's actually in history. My parents weren't really keen on backing a theater degree, but history is what most of the men in my family end up a history degree. My dad had one. My brother had one. The women tend to go into philosophy. That's what my sister got.
Those are interesting conversations around the Thanksgiving
Oh, yeah,
table.
we didn't talk about sports a lot, but at the Battle of Cressay.
Yeah, of course.
Effective were the longbows against the English armor.
So, okay, so you're going to USF, and then what happens next?
I took a side path into archaeology, so I got into anthropology, and through that I got a job with the State Department of Historic Sites and Archives. And in 1982, I spent about a year working the I-75 bypass site. So that was about to be built. They'd found some interesting artifacts. So then we went out, several different crews, and we had to survey the ground. We had to look for if there was anything, and there was. The final one, it was right where, I mean, the bulldozers were right on the edge of the thing gunning it, but we had taken the soil down about almost 6 feet, and Tampa was covered at that time with white sand, beautiful white sugar sand, but the slightest gust of wind would bring that up, and it would get in your eyes and your nose and your food. I could always tell coming into my apartment where I'd been because of the trails of sand. My roommate would say, "Get a broom, just get a broom." Yeah, and that's when acting kind of was like, because you're always hot, you're always cold, you're always wet. My idea of archaeology had been really tempered by the Indiana Jones films. And so real archaeology, though, is not at all like that. It's slow and methodical. It's science. You shave the soil with your shovel. It goes into a sieve. Anything bigger than your thumbnail gets a 10-digit number written on it so it can be identified in a worldwide grid, or at least that was archaeology in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking about how lovely theaters are.
Right.
I think just hearing you describe that, Michael, that you didn't necessarily want it to be an archaeologist, but you wanted to play one.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to play one on TV.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're playing archaeologist, and then you decide to go back to theater.
Yes, and so I went back to USF, and I took a lot of theater courses at that point. What was his name? So there were a lot of great professors. Unfortunately, most of them have passed away at this point. But after I got out of that, I discovered Renaissance festivals, and so
Milord,
Milady, and they paid.
Do you sense a recurring theme, ladies and
I got
gentlemen?
my first paid
Actors are
acting
always
gig.
worried about that.
Oh, yeah. Well,
because that's why you do it.
and because paying jobs are thin on the ground, half of it is trying to find the job. The other half is trying to get that check in anything like a likely manner. I've had amazing excuses as to why I don't have the check. My favorite was the only person that can cut the check is in Eastern Europe adopting a baby and won't be back for 6 weeks.
Mercy.
Yeah,
There we go.
that's great.
I don't want to ring a bell on that, although I'm tempted.
Yeah,
It's
how do
one
you,
of those.
and you can't really complain about how
Having a baby.
Yeah, how dare she
Damn
go through
it.
this amazing life change? Where's my check?
Yeah. Well, anybody who makes money through the arts, whether it's acting,
Consignment
or
work.
painting, you're whatever, and any kind of visual artist, a lot of people have gone through that. You're the one that's not important in the end, you know.
Especially
You're
after
the least priority. Maybe
You're the
that's
lowest
it.
priority.
Yes.
That's another way to say it. Yeah. So we're acting, and now because I want to get to this trip to California, so
It should be coming up right about
so,
now.
I met a guy I worked with for a long time on the Renaissance Festival circuit, but around 1999. I was getting a lot of advice. Hey, you're good. You should go out in California. There's also a perception that if you haven't been on television or in the movies, well, how good an actor are you really? Which is an insult to all live stage actors.
Thank you.
You know, and that's a very
Even community theater.
Oh yeah, all of it. Anytime you're on stage, trotting the boards, playing a character, it's all acting. But I was in my late 30s, I guess, at that point. And so I listened to it. My wife and I boldly set off across the country, 6 days, 6 cats, driving across country to California. I had a connection there. My older sister, Beth, she's retired now, but a lovely career as a scene painter. So she had some connections. And more importantly, she had a condo she let us stay at.
Oh, there you go.
So, that and I struggled and I tried and
audition after audition.
If you look very closely at a lot of television from the turn of the century, I'm in the background. I was mainly a background actor. They used to call them extras.
Right.
Who was it? Hitchcock referred to them as scenery that eats. But
craft service table. We always knew what it was.
Craft services. Oh, the unholy joy of craft services and what you're allowed to get.
Right. And so, you always 8 second.
Union actors always go first, and then union extras. And so I was a non-union extra for a long time. Finally got my waivers. So you have to get 3 non-union waivers in order to qualify for SAG. I saved up the money, and because money was tight, California's a very expensive state. It's all priced like someone that is a lead in a sitcom, but very few people actually are. And then they went on strike, and the people that would man the protest lines or the phones could just join if they had the money. They waived the whole waiver thing that had taken me years to get. And my wife never liked California. She did really well out there because it turns out if you don't want to be an actor, there's all kinds of jobs in California because everyone wants to be an actor. Yeah, so they needed people, and she did really well. But at the end of the day, it was just like, let's go back. And thank God Tampa was here. And thank God I had enough of a career to pick up again. And that's when I started Norton Interactive Entertainment and just doing characters and shows for themed events. I had worked at Busch Gardens back in the late 80s and learned how to do corporate events there. And that was a lot of the money. A lot of what I acted in the 80s and 90s were corporate events. Always fun, always big money. Pharma companies used to throw the most enormous parties, renting out whole sections of theme parks or parking lots in Orlando hotels. I mean, just these enormous bacchanals. And
sparing no expense.
Oh, yeah, and paid really nicely. And so, so I did that. And then when I came back, I was able to pick up that again. And then I started doing historic characters when I came back in the 2000s. I'd done a few. I played Theodore Roosevelt for the museum, for the H.B. Plant Museum in the mid-90s. But when I came back from California, there had been enough time that there had been turnover in all my booking agents, but I ran into a woman named Maureen Patrick, and Maureen is brilliant. She's an historian. She's an actress. She's worked in theme parks and theater. She's a fixture of this area. She should be far better known than she is. And Maureen brought me on board for stuff she was doing, including teaching kids theater. I had never really thought about that, and I did that for on and off for about a decade when I got back.
That sounds like a lot of fun as well.
Oh, they were. The children are entertaining and frustrating all at the same time. Some of them are great. None of them are bad. There really aren't any really bad kids, you know. They are self-destructive, though.
I haven't heard you mention any of your own, so I'm guessing that you didn't have any children of your own.
No. I used to do a thing when people say, "Do you have any kids?" I'd look really sad and go, "No, my wife and I were never blessed." If you say it just right, it has undertones of religion and messy medical procedures.
Right.
But nowadays,
not the fact
we just
that you couldn't have any, she couldn't have any, or whatever the reason.
Exactly.
Was. Or you just made a conscious decision not to because there were other things that you more pressing.
Well, yeah. Also, I'm very jealous. I didn't want to share my wife's affection with her.
There you go. There you go. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and play the station identification and a PSA. We'll be right back on the other side in just a moment.
You're listening to The Conversation with Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter on WMNF 88.5 Tampa.
This is an important election year. To help inform you about voting, the candidates, and issues on the ballot, The WMNF News team has partnered with 10 other public media organizations around the state to create a 2024 Florida Voter Guide. You can find it on our website at wmnf.org/vote. It has information about all the candidates for U.S. Senate, U.S. House, Florida Senate, and Florida House. Candidates provide their positions on issues ranging from the cost of insurance to the environment to how they'll vote on the proposed constitutional amendments. You will also find a tool to help locate the district you vote in, as well as how to register to vote and how to find your polling location. Tell a friend about WMNF.org/vote, information about candidates and issues in the 2024 elections in Florida.
If you're just joining us, this is The Conversation, WMNF 88.5. I'm Mario Nunez alongside Joe King Carter. And today you're hearing some of the stories of our wonderful guest, Mike Norton, who has quite a tale to tell. Mike, we were talking about your experience with teaching youngsters, and as a coach of young kids, it's always a challenge because sometimes you got to keep them on task, and the other side of it too is you have to make it fun, because if it's not fun, the kids won't engage. Acting is a little bit different.
Well, but some of the dynamics are the same. It has to be fun because there's a lot of repetition. I just remember kids are like, "Why are we doing this scene again? We just did it." It's like, well, we repeat so we remember, and memory is theater. Once you have the lines down, then you can start having fun with them, but you do have to have the lines down first. So kids are great if self-destructive. I used to say this thing, it's an example, no one would ever really do this, but if you had 10 kids and you took them into a room, and on one end of the room there's brightly colored broken glass and the other end there's brightly colored feathers, they'll split about 50-50. But if you warn them beforehand, the brightly colored glass is dangerous and will cut you, all the kids go to the glass. Every single one of them. Every time.
They're going to do themselves harm no matter what.
Yeah. The danger is exciting, of course.
That could be a big piece of it as well. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So along the path of your reenacting career, where you impersonate different historical figures, has there been a favorite for you to play?
Well, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore's been very, very good to me. I portray him mainly for the Plant Museum, but I've also portrayed him in a lot of other places, other museums as well. Theodore has a fascinating life. And what I like about Theodore is that he really would put his money where his mouth is. For instance, the Spanish-American War. Theodore had been pushing for the United States to be involved in a war. He thought it would show America's mettle on the international stage, a time for us to stand up, to be thought of the equals with the European superpowers. It would have been very easy for him to sit the war out. He was Assistant Secretary of the Navy.
He was a Roosevelt also.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But he resigned his post as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, became Lieutenant Colonel, not Colonel of his own regiment. He insisted that an experienced officer, Captain Wood, who later became Colonel Leonard Wood, who later became General Leonard Wood, take over because that man had more experience, was also a friend of Theodore's, and had won a Medal of Honor during the Apache campaigns. He was also President McKinley's personal doctor. And that's why when you look at the pictures of the Rough Riders here in Tampa, the Rough Riders have khaki uniforms, and almost everyone else is wearing blue wool. This is blue wool in Tampa in June, and they will wear those uniforms to fight in Cuba in July.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole military of the United States was about 30,000 people in 1898, and it was scattered in garrisons across the country. So 15,000 of those regulars came to Tampa in the end of May and beginning of June, and 15,000 volunteer regiments, the precursors to the National Guard, and all of them are clad in the blue wool of Uncle Sam.
I can only imagine what that must have been like, not just the smelly times, but the fact that, there was also the food and the hardtack and sleeping rough. And I don't even know, how did they survive that, let alone then have to go fight?
There were troops backed up all the way to Lakeland. Yeah, that's how many troops came into Tampa. Every inch of Tampa was covered. West Tampa, Ybor City. The generals all stayed at the Tampa Bay Hotel, which was a non-air-conditioned building because it predates air conditioning. And one of the generals that summer said the thermometers reached 110 degrees.
Sweaty mess.
Oh, yeah.
Very much. So how lucky you are that Teddy Roosevelt has such a linkage with Tampa and Ybor City.
And performing him at the museum is incredible because I'm in the building where he actually walked. I'm looking at things he actually viewed. And so that just really helps
Imbues you with that spirit.
It does. And for them, I've also done H.B. Plant himself, Henry Bradley Plant. I'll be portraying him again on Saturday over in Plant City for their Pioneer Day. That'll be at the old junior high.
I have a confession to make, and you follow me on this. I did not know, because I just thought because of the agribusiness that came out of Plant City, it was because of the strawberry plants and the plants et al. That's the reason that the city derived its name. It wasn't until kind of recently that I realized, no, fool.
Named
that
after
was
H.B. Plant.
Yes,
Same way that
of
Plant
course.
High School is named after him.
And same way that Ybor City is named after Mr. Ybor.
Well, lots of people in Plant City don't realize that either. And I've done
Well, let's
this
start that movement right now.
Yeah, exactly. He's named after H.B. Plant.
H.B.
Now,
Plant.
this is not to say he was terribly fond of the city. The story goes that it had been named Cork because they had a postmaster there from Ireland. So he called it Cork. And it was just a whistle stop.
The city where he was from, probably in Ireland.
So
right?
Plant City, Cork at that time is a tiny little rural community. It is 48 hours away from anything, maybe 24 by fast horse. But if you're trying to take your produce into Tampa, it's an overnight trip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's no paved roads. It's all sand paths, originally laid out by deer and feral cattle, and then finally people coming in. And
So ruddy travel.
oh yeah, it's tough. And so the railroad comes and it opens Plant City to the world. I mean, it must have been such a cultural shock for these people. And so then they decide to call it Plant City. There's still people in Plant City who would like to call it Cork again because apparently Mr. Plant, they finally told him that, hey, they've named this town after you. And he pulled the shade down, looked out once, pulled it all the way down. He was not impressed. It was just another whistle stop. Also, there's a lot of towns in Florida that have city attached to them, which, as we know, like Haines City.
Dade City?
Lovely places, not cities. Railroaders tend to put city onto any town they go through because it now sounds like there's more things
Civilization.
to come and see.
Right.
Mr. Plant figured out the trick to Florida. You can make a lot of money exporting its phosphate and its produce, but the real money is bringing people in to see. Look at this
Absolutely.
weather. And that's why the University of Tampa looks the way it does.
Yes.
Verify something for me, Mike, because this has always been interesting to me. Maybe it's fable, maybe it's fact, but that HB was a big fan of the science fiction of its day. And there was a book entitled "From Here to the Moon," and the author's name just escaped it.
Jules Verne.
Jules Verne. He was a big Jules Verne fan, and that in the book "From Here to the Moon," the launch of the rocket ship was supposed to be at Ballast Point. Ballast Point being where Ballast Point is today. So he thought, okay, if I build my hotel and end my rail line right there close to Ballast Point, the people can come and they can see the rocket ship take off, because he bought into all of this. And that's kind of where the terminus of his railhead was, and ultimately where on the river he built the Tampa Bay Hotel. It kind of fits, but I don't have anything to verify that any more than Buffalo Avenue was named after the Buffalo Soldier encampment, which was, about where 40th Street was. I don't have anything to verify, but it fits.
Well, it does. Well, the thing about From the Earth to the Moon, Tampa is mentioned as the nearest city. The actual launch site is 50 miles inland at a mountain that doesn't exist.
Okay.
Because Mr. Jules Verne had never been to Florida, never came to Florida.
Right.
He was figuring out, for the same reason that the NASA scientists put Cape Canaveral where they do, something about, the trajectory of the rockets going into orbit. So Mr. Jules Verne figured this out on his own in the 1860s. He was big time into science. He had files about all the new scientific things of the day. That's why the Nautilus, the submarine, is so excellently portrayed, because he's using the technology of the time. So the Confederates make the Huntley. The Union has has a submarine as well called the Alligator or the Crocodile, and it bears a strong resemblance to a lot of things found in the Nautilus. It's got carbon dioxide scrubbers. It's got an airlock. Divers can go in and out of it. It gets lost in a storm at sea, but it drowned a lot less people than the Huntley did. So the Huntley's the Confederate submarine. It killed 3 crews by sinking. It does take out a Union ship, but the crew that sinks the Union ship drowns in the Huntley.
And let me offer this to you.
That's amazing information.
It is amazing information. That's what fans of history are good. A historian is good at.
I told you those conversations at the Thanksgiving table must have been.
But the way I would describe that, because I sometimes do tours, at Plant Hall. And the way I see that story, and see if you concur, Michael, is that Plant, really, H.B. Plant and Henry Flagler are the two men that really pioneered tourism in Florida. Okay, they saw the potential for that, and my feeling is that Plant built the hotel at more or less at the end of the line as a destination. And today some people refer to his hotel, Plant Hotel, as the Disney World of its day.
First Magic Kingdom in Florida.
100%.
Yeah, it was the first Magic Kingdom
because it was magical. It was magical.
Oh yeah,
a 6-acre footprint. It had bowling alleys and barber shops in the basement, and
lawn tennis,
and it had lawn tennis.
You name it. A heated swimming pool in the casino that, with the help of a retractable wooden floor, became the dance hall in the evenings. Building featuring unique products from Florida, specifically phosphate. Plant made a lot of money off of phosphate. There was a big boom of it in the 1880s. There was a phosphate rush, like a gold rush in California. It was in everything from munitions to detergents. So it comes from mainly Polk County, places like Bone Valley and Tiger Creek. It's fossilized marine life. So an amazing
eons
invention.
and eons of time to produce that.
It does.
Bartow and Mulberry, those areas. Yeah.
So what it did was it revitalized all that burnt out cotton land. So they've been growing cotton on that stuff in the southeast. The nutrients are leached out of the soil. Agriculture is the one thing the South still kind of has going for it in the post-war period. We need to bring it back. Fertilizer. Oh my gosh, phosphate. The miracle ingredient that brings plants back to life.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Just ask the people at Mosaic. They'll tell you.
They'll
tell you all about it. But
they'll sing their praises.
Yeah, that hotel is a quarter-mile long. 4 stories tall. The minarets are mainly almost 10. 150 acres around it, all carefully sculpted with gardens. There were plants there that you would see nowhere else in North America. So Mr. Plant and Anton Fihé, who I've also portrayed, a gentleman from Alsace, Lorraine, don't you know? And so they went down there to the Royal Botanical Gardens, and they got plant clippings, and there was fresh plants, the smell of lilac and orange blossoms in the air. And this is all to entice the wealthy from New York, Philadelphia, and Boston to come down, spend the winter season. Coming down their private Pullman cars, the Lear jet of the time. Oh, it was amazing.
When Plant went to, he and his wife went to Europe, he started purchasing
voracious collectors.
Oh yeah, with both hands.
Works of art, historical works of art that are in the museum, and he bought so much that a third of it, when he came back, had to be given away or sold. He couldn't get it into the hotel.
41 boxcars filled that place.
That's right.
They had gone to the Universal Exhibition in Paris, World's Fair, and he was on the newly built Eiffel Tower on July 4th. He raised the American flag.
Wow.
The fair's theme was republicanism, countries that had gotten rid of their monarchy, which means it was boycotted by England and Russia and a couple other countries that still had very effective monarchies at that time. It was like,
and our conversation has almost gone full circle as where we started this morning. Mike, you're a wealth of information, and we could have done 2 or 3 hours, and we're going to probably have to bring you back. We're not done with this show yet, certainly.
Thrill.
I want to give the number again in case somebody wants to add to our conversation, and we know you're out there listening because you always are. 813-239-9663. You can send us a text at 813-433-0885. Jessica's standing by to let me know when you send us an email, dj@wmnf.org. How much fun is Mike Norton having these days?
Oh, a ton. Things are actually really. Last October was amazing. I was everything from a tugboat captain handing out pumpkins for the pirate water taxi to H.B. Plant. Just a ton of characters all the time, which is nice that I have Halloween night off this one year.
So I have a burning question.
Sure.
That's been burning since the moment I met you. You must have done Mark Twain as a character.
Yes.
He looks like him. For those of you that can't see
I
him,
have a bit of Sam Clemens going on at the moment. My hair is really long. I got a white mustache.
Well, I would assume as you age, you'll get more Clemens-like.
Well, Yeah, I'm 65, so the hair is mine
It's
and
there.
it's the original color. The mustache and the beard come in Snow White. That's a very bizarre, and the eyebrows
Yeah.
that have all gotten. So
But if you powdered your hair, you're there.
The Tampa the Tampa Storytelling Festival used to be put on by the Tampa Library System, and it was for young people to come and tell stories, and then they would have professional storytellers from all over the world come and tell their stories. And I played a lot of characters. So one time I was Samuel Clemens, and that is now a stock photo. So if you look somewhere, there's me as Sam Clemens. I'm looking down at a young person, and it looks all very future storytellers of America kind of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they have my name wrong. I'm listed as Mark Norton.
Your
Well,
alter ego.
Close enough.
Mark Twain, Mike Norton.
You and I have to do Mike a solid and introduce him, and I promised that we would do this, introduce him to our dear friends Justin Peters and Kelly Buttermore.
Oh,
because,
absolutely.
they need to meet him. He needs to know what they're doing. We need to introduce him to the Commodore Theater because he doesn't know about that yet, but I believe there will be an opportunity for him not only to be a monologist during Salud and Happy Days, certainly, but maybe even to join the troupe or to give lessons, whatever. He just needs to know that wonderful repertoire exists and that he can contribute.
He would be
mightily.
Professor Norton there.
Yeah, I think you're right. No. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And they are your cohorts and they are your compadres, and you would fit in like hand in glove.
So
Well, you can never tell what they're going to ask you to be for. I was a paleontologist for Dinosaur World for a couple of years.
Come on.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about dinosaurs going in. It turns out the little I thought I knew was way outdated. And I became pretty good at it. I mean, to the general public, I sound like a paleontologist. I'm sure to an actual paleontologist, I sounded like the general public.
Oh, I know. So we've asked him all, and he's all of these wonderful, wonderful characters. Have you ever played the opposite sex? Have you been a Mrs. Doubtfire?
No, only one time did it come up. When I got back from California, we were living very briefly in Orlando, and there's a murder mystery place there.
Because
and-
even Tom Hanks, you know.
Oh, sure. And
Yeah.
it's not that I wouldn't play a
female?
lady. I wouldn't. I would have no problem with that, or do drag. Except I don't really seem to have the handle on it. Those who do this and do it well, they know what they're doing and they are incredible at it. So they asked me to try, and I gave it a shot. I can't say I did it very well. The only thing that irked me about that was they were like, well, we want you to really be a woman. I want you to really think about this, and we don't do spoofs here. So later on, I did get the job. Later on, I went back with guests to this murder mystery, and the woman was a guy with a beard with balloons shoved down his shirt, obviously balloons, and it was just like,
Oh,
I could do
you respect,
that.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you want. Good Lord.
yeah, right. A pale imitation.
Oh, yeah. It was just, no, we respect women. We want you to do the character justice and fully. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Shave the
you
beard.
kind of get
Shave
to
the
be
beard.
you kind of get to be a great imposter for your
Yes,
as a job.
it's also professional lying, if you want to think it that way. I'm telling people I'm a different kind of character. You have to be careful sometimes. For instance, the paleontologist. To actually call yourself a paleontologist, you need a postgraduate degree.
Correct.
So I always was dancing around that, trying to, I'm a shovel bum. I don't have the degree, but I've done a lot of digs. And I have, just not in paleontology. I've my experiences in archaeology. And I can't really call myself an archaeologist either because I don't have a postgraduate degree in archaeology. I also don't have a postgraduate degree in history. So I'm always running into that you're an amateur historian, you're a dilettante historian.
A lay historian.
A local historian. And
Yeah.
I've also heard this new public scholar, which I kind of like the sound of.
Public scholar.
Public scholar.
I don't mind that either.
No, I like public scholar.
Well, it's very true. I call myself sometimes a lay historian or a resident historian in Ybor City. It's a tough thing because once you're in the presence of true academic historians, you begin to understand that that's that's a very
Next level.
and
That's
day.
next level.
Night
Next
and
level.
day. When I pretensions towards academia, this the discipline and the specialization that really, when you're writing your thesis, you have to have a very, in this glass window, the stained glass window, is the depiction of Adam and Eve. Is she holding an apple or a persimmon? And yes, and that was what one of my professors had written his paper on, his thesis. It was that tight. And so I'm good at interpreting. So a very smart person does a huge amount of work and produces an awful lot of data. I'm good at processing that data and relaying it to the public in an accessible and hopefully somewhat entertaining manner.
No, very entertaining.
Yeah,
so
what
we've
you
seen
do
your
is-
work. We've seen your work, Mike.
Yeah.
Very entertaining. And as you're referencing, the kind of the cute way of saying that actors are professional liars in a certain loose description, the thought came to my mind. Oh, he's seen John Lovitz on Saturday Night
Oh,
Live.
yes.
You know?
Acting brilliant. I did the first thing I'd ever done. Pay attention to another actor on the stage. Let your voice rise to a crescendo and then let it trickle down, which is exactly how I do the Ghost of Christmas Present when I performed for, there was a kids production of Christmas Carol. And so I got to be, for about 5 years.
Another classic at Christmas time. That's a wonderful show.
Oh, I
Most
wanted
high
to play
schools do that.
Marley. That's the part. These are the chains I forged in life. I made them link by link and yard by yard.
That's a great
The
character.
great Marley.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Joey, don't you just want to go out now and do a little ensemble with Mike? Don't you want to
I
do
want
some
to hit the boards. I want to hit the boards.
Drop
Yeah,
those
no,
boards.
listen, man, we need to get together and do some scene study, man. Maybe do some
There
reading
we
together.
go. Yeah.
So playing Edgar Allan Poe this Halloween was awesome. He's my new favorite character. So it goes Edgar Allan Poe, Theodore Roosevelt, Jose Gaspar, because I've played him for the Tampa Convention and Visitors Bureau, Visit Tampa Bay since about 2002. Yeah, they did this huge party at the...
In full regalia?
Yeah, you have to. Arr, matey. And why would a Spanish pirate be talking like this? When we go to pirate school, that's the reason. Went with Blackbeard, and I went with Captain Kidd and Captain Hook, but you never wanted Hook to take notes because his handwriting was terrible. That's
We'll be here all week.
There we go. Yeah, yeah.
But it's fun, though. It's fun. And
Oh,
I think it's a youthful enterprise so that, you're 63 now, you said 64.
65.
65?
Yeah.
How can you be 65? 'Cause
almost 60.
There you go.
65 in June.
There you go. And so, but it keeps you young. It keeps you
Yes.
young. And, oh, by the way, you have to keep yourself rather healthy because, there's a bit of agility. There's movement to
The
your theater.
physical,
The physical.
yeah.
Talk to that. Speak to that for a couple of minutes.
Well, as you get older, the joke is you can do anything you did at 18 except recover. Exercise bike. I suffer from leg cramps pretty badly sometimes. So you've got to be careful with your electrolyte intake and magnesium pills. They're just the things I never had to do as a young actor.
Right, yeah.
Just put on the tights, put on the boots, and out you go.
And go.
Yeah. And you've most recently been doing Poe.
Yes, I had that great chance to do that 2 weeks at the HB Plant Museum for their Erie evenings. We did 3 nights a weekend, so 6 performances, 12 renditions of The Raven, a couple of Annabelle Lee's thrown in there too.
And so how do you build very quickly, how do you build a character and a voice for one that we're not familiar with other than his appearance?
Well, you have to do your biographies, and so I always approach all historical characters. First thing I do is because I was a history major, is you check out primary resources.
Riff on Poe. Riff on Poe for 2 minutes.
All right, so
we love Poe's history.
Poe is an amazing character. His parents are actors. His mother dies when he's 3 of consumption. She has been touring the Eastern Seaboard. So Poe was born in Boston, but she dies in Richmond, Virginia. Poe is fostered by a wealthy family in Richmond, Virginia, the Allens. And so I always portray him with a Southern accent because he spent most of his early life in Richmond, Virginia, and was raised to be a Southern gentleman. And so that's very important, I think, for my take on the character. Sometimes I'll try and slip in like a Baltimore sound. So when he's when he says Bird Boyd, so that's a little something like that. He wrote these stories. He had actually a very happy home life briefly. So he married his cousin Virginia. They were married for 10 years. He lived with her and his aunt, who he called Muddy. Apparently, by everyone's account, they were just this little bubble of happiness. She would sing and play the piano. He would play the flute. They would play hopscotch, leapfrog in the garden. He split his pants once, and apparently she could not stop laughing about that. They had a cat named Katerina, who used to lay on Poe's shoulders while he was writing.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he's got this great little home life, but it falls apart. And he's always... he's got this, what he calls the imp of the perverse, because he was never fully adopted by the Allens, because his father walked out on the family when his mother was pregnant with his youngest sister. There was a feeling of not having worth. that, and so this kind of self-destructive tendency would flare up every so often. And it really got bad after his wife died.
And everybody around him died of consumption.
His wife passed away of consumption at the age of 24. His brother died of consumption at the age of 24. His mother died of consumption at the age of 24.
Wow.
So he's carrying this around. Mask of the Red Death is all about that. Consumption is tuberculosis. When you cough, you bleed. When his wife first had her symptom come out, she bled profusely. He thought she was going to die that night. She struggled for 5 years with the disease. And so this idea of she's almost dying and coming back and almost dying and coming back, you see that happening over and over again in his works. Except for one, El Dorado. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight in sunshine and in shadow, journeyed long, singing a song, searching for El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow, for he had found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Pilgrim shadow, he asked, where can be found this spot of ground that looks like El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek El Dorado.
Yeah, excellent. There we go.
Yes. Well, listen, we're going to get run out of town here in just a couple of seconds. I just wanted to say, Mike, it has been a privilege and a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much.
We want to have you
It's
back.
been wonderful,
Would you
Mike.
honor
Thank
us
you.
with a repeat visit?
Be my pleasure. And before we
Yes.
go, I want to say, none of this would be possible without my beloved Gwendolyn. We've been married for 34 years, been together 38. She is my rock and my rod, my staff, and she is the best thing that has ever happened to
Bravo,
me.
Gwendolyn. Bravo.
Coming next. You are listening to WMNF 88.5 Tampa.